All right. Ladies and gentlemen, fresh from Alaska, Troup, Brinson, and his friend Smooch.
Troup, Smooch, and the Dawgs Show. Another new episode is coming up tonight.
It's the Dawgs Show. It's the Dawgs Show. It's the Dawgs Show.
You're listening to the one and only Dawgs Show. Your hosts, Troup, Brinson, and Smooch Moncrief.
Just two dudes talking Georgia football.
Welcome, Dog fans, to the one and only Dawgs Show with Troup and Smooch. A drum roll as an introduction, man. It does feel like I've been gone a little while because I've been gone so far away.
Yes.
The last frontier state, whatever they call it, 49 state. I was in Alaska for 9 days, just back, and I am trying to adjust, Smooch, to back in Georgia because the temperatures in Alaska where we were between 45 and 65.
Human. You mean they were human? Yes.
you could bear it. Yes. So it was a nice respite to get away, and I think we're gonna start having our show a little earlier in the week, so it was kind of a way to reset that as well. Right. But I'm glad to be back. But the adventure, man, Alaska is all about adventure, and you went last year with us, and so a lot of fishing the salmon run all week, and we fished 10 hours one day, and it doesn't get dark. It doesn't get dark till, we were fishing at 11 p.m. and felt like dusk. It was beautiful. It was like the magic hour. It was 11 p.m.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. You can't imagine it until you see it. I can remember being woken up at midnight because the sun was in my eyes. It was, through the window of the RV we had rented. It's an amazing trip. Amy and I were not able to go this year. We will go. This is an annual trip for the Dawgs Show, by the way. Troup's wife, we should mention, is Alaskan, and she is an Alaska expert. And so we do not go as tourists; they go as people revisiting. So when it comes to fishing, they're not fishing with the Tourons. They're fishing with the fishermen. And when we go out, it just all of the cool places. And when you say adjusting, Troup, it's not just the time difference, and it's not just the weather. It's just freedom personified. And if you're not good at freedom, you're going to get eaten by something. It's it's a whole different thing, and it does. You take a time to adjust when you get back to civilization.
Yep, 4-hour time difference. So that's something to adjust to for sure when you go and when you come back. But yeah, we saw a couple of grizzly bears, and by the way, when you see those grizzly bears, they aren't in a cage. They are not in a cage or behind fences. So you know. So you're at your own risk. Everything you saw, we saw several moose and black bear as well, and an eagle.
Tell me about the bald eagle. This is amazing, Dawgs Show. Listen to this.
So yeah, we just walked down to the Russian River, and there were some, because people you clean your salmon right there at the river, and then you pack it out.
Because you can't hike it out because it's too treacherous of terrain. So you make your load as light as possible. Go.
Yeah, because you fillet it up, and you essentially cut most of the weight out when you take 2 fillets from the salmon. Anyway, so people throw their carcasses, but there was a carcass out in the river on the other side of the river, and a eagle just, when they had her camera filming, and he just swooped right in, snatched it up, and went on about his way. So I was like, wow.
Do we have that video? We can drop it in the show right here.
Yes. Let's put it up there. And this is that. And I even got a moose I can show here as well. I didn't get pictures of the grizzly bear. Mm-hmm. It's like when you see a Sasquatch, you don't always take time, or a grizzly bear for that matter.
You don't reach for the phone. you reach for the let's get the heck out of here.
Yeah. So, but a great week, but good to be back. And we are starting a segment or a part of our show called Countdown to Kickoff.
Countdown to Kickoff, baby.
Because we are just over 3 weeks away, we're 3 weeks away, basically, until Georgia and Clemson kick it off.
Yeah, exactly. And So Troup mentioned it just a little bit earlier. We had decided, we can't keep doing a Thursday show once the season starts. So when do we do it? And this Alaska break gave us just the right time to do it. So this show, as you hear it now, is being recorded on Tuesday. You'll probably receive it around lunch on Wednesday. We're talking about even moving that 24 hours earlier as well, just to better get, stay with the flow of the season, because we're here, Troup. I mean, we've got just 3 Saturdays without football. That's all that's left. And the NFL starts Friday.
Wow. And we've been getting a practice report, so we hear kind of what's going on at practice and some of the players who are shining, which, you take it for what it's worth, but it always looks good when you practice well. And Georgia's got some players we'll talk about a little bit, just in case you folks aren't in the know and haven't heard some of the players that are doing some things that are worth taking note. But we want to talk a little bit about those Clemson Tigers.
The opponent.
A once regular opponent for Georgia. They last played them to start the season in 2021, I think, and that was that Chris Smith interception.
Right.
But that was a 10-3 defensive battle, and I think JT Daniels started that game, and Clemson's defense was really stout. But since then, Clemson feels like a little different program, but you mentioned it a couple weeks ago. Even so, a team that Georgia has to take seriously and will take seriously, and I'm sure they are practicing with that in mind. I think Clemson ranked right now 14th in the coaches poll that just came out.
That's correct. Yep, 14th.
Georgia's ranked number 1 in the coaches poll. But Clemson is maybe a perfect opponent for Georgia, because they're favored by a couple of touchdowns, and it's going to be in Atlanta, I think, right?
Yeah, Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Yep. And so, but it gets your attention because Clemson is a team who has won a couple of national championships in recent memory. And they still have Dabo Sweeney. They don't recruit at the level that a lot of these teams do that are perennial contenders, but they are always contender. One reason because they play in the ACC. But as I look at Clemson the past couple years, while they have not had a transcendent quarterback, the results have not been the same. At all.
You could really make the case that Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence made Dabo. I mean, I think it's hard to argue otherwise at this point, that there does seem to be, without a marquee quarterback in that position, a real drop-off in what Clemson is. Now, they still, they're in South Carolina. Their location, in other words, gets them players, but they don't have a long arm in recruiting, and they don't really play the portal game at all, right? And so they're a solid opponent, a dangerous opponent, but as we're going to talk, there's just ifs at every position, and we'll talk about that as we get going.
They finished 6th in the ACC last year, lost 4 games. They opened their season last season with a loss to Duke. Duke beat them 28-7 to start the season, with Cade Klubnik, who was a heralded recruit, but he just didn't have the results last year. And you mentioned a statistic where he is a classic dink and dunk quarterback in terms of his results.
Yeah, so the problem with Clemson, you can put it on offensive line, which I've seen people do. You can put it on receivers, which they have the same receivers back. So I don't, but they've got talent. But let's look at this. Clemson last year, Troup Brinson, 6.1 yards per pass play in 2023. Elite teams between 9 and 10. Georgia was 9.3 last year for reference there. That was good, by the way. 6.1 yards per pass play with their talent. Cade Klubnik, 5-star quarterback. That was good for 121st in the nation. That's up there with some Colorado type of numbers.
Yeah. They did. They, like I said, lost to Duke, NC State, Florida State. They lost they did beat South Carolina. I thought they might have lost to them, but they did beat them. They lost 4 games overall. Miami beat them as well. They lost 3 games the year before, so 7 losses in the past 2 seasons.
Okay.
And so,
hey, Troup, how many seasons has it taken Georgia to lose 7 games?
Oh, I would have to really do some math. I would have to look back.
It's a lot.
Maybe back to the Mark Richt era.
Yeah, probably so. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I say all that because it's true.
Right.
It's not to really diminish I guess, what Clemson represents to open this season, because it's a big game, because it's the first game of the season, but also a top 15 team and possibly a top 10 team. That's always, and if nothing else, it gets your players' attention because they have won a couple of national championships in the past 10 years. So that's going to get the players' attention. That's always important when you're preparing and you have that game to kick off the season in terms of practice. It's a tough time to practice in the heat in Georgia, as we all know. But, I looked at some of the names, and you can speak on it too.
Sure.
It's always, you have to be able to run the ball against Georgia. Unless you have, even if you have a transcendent quarterback, you still got to be able to run the ball against.
That's right. In the SEC, you have to. Who
will take away, for the most part, what you do well. They'll take something away. And if Georgia can take away your running game without much difficulty, then you are in a bad spot offensively. It will shut you down. Mm-hmm. I just don't know if Klubnik has shown the ability. He has it, even if in his second year. Looking at what he did this past year before, he just doesn't look like the quarterback that they hoped he would be.
He's shown.
So they're going to have to be able to run the ball. And I'm looking at their running back, and can you looking at the depth chart right now?
Yeah, I'm yeah.
What's his name? What's the
Philip Maffa.
Yes.
Mafaa. So I went and watched some of his games as we been preparing these last few weeks. He's a bruiser. He's not fast. He's not speedy. But he is the unquestioned starter. It is Philip Maffa. He is I believe he came back for his senior year this year. He's a I don't know, Brandon Jacobs. I don't know how many people remember that style of runner, but not a game breaker. The battle so I've listened to quite. We follow all kinds of teams' podcasts. So I've listened to some Clemson podcasts, and they're concerned with the battle over the number 2 running back spot. So they're not really concerned. They assume that Phil Maffa is the unquestioned leader. It comes down, Troup Brinson, to Jay Haynes, who is a redshirt freshman going into this year, and then they have this freshman that they're really high on. I believe he's a 4-star. His name, I can't get this right, David Nziamume. But he's got a ton of hype behind him. He's one of those guys. Remember when we start hearing about Andrew Paul a few years ago at practice and everybody was so excited? That's the type of buzz that David Nziamume is getting right now. He's very aggressive. He attacks the hole. He puts his head down. 213-pound runner. And so is a veteran going to win that number 2 running back position, or will this freshman? That's kind of where they are.
Yeah, and regardless of what happens, it's going to be a tough row to hoe for Clemson to run the ball against Georgia. And I think it could be a tight game depending on how well Georgia executes. Always like that. Georgia is going to be competing against themselves in a lot of games, even against teams who are top 20, top 15, top 10 type teams. They still Georgia. True. Is at a level where they set their own standards. Mm-hmm. But I think we feel great about this game. I know I do, even though I can remember going into that game a couple years ago and thinking, dang, this is to go either way. I think Clemson might have been even favored in that game.
They were favored when Georgia won 10-3.
That was maybe one of the last games Georgia was not favored. Yeah. It might be the last time Georgia was not favored in a game, and they won that, of course, 10-3, like you said, and Chris Smith with that interception read the quarterback really well, and that was who was quarterback? Was that DJ Ungalele then?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And he was a sophomore, and it was just assumed, much like Tennessee is assuming with Nico, that this guy was just going to come in and be lights out. He was prepared, he was ready to go. Another thing we saw in that last Georgia Clemson game was we saw Brock Bowers. That was Brock Bowers' first game. And he was catching passes. Now, they were short dink and dunk passes, but the game plan and the quarterback at Georgia didn't really open up and get big playish until Stetson came in. But if you go back and watch that game, you'd be surprised how many times they called Brock Bowers' number back in that game.
What are you hearing in terms of, you listen to another podcast, what do the fans, Clemson fans, think about their quarterback, Cade Klubnik?
So the thing with their quarterback, this is interesting. They're very high on his potential. Now, we both remember him coming out of high school, and there was assumed potential, right? But the odd thing is there's no one considering at all, and I mean at all, I haven't heard any podcast consider he's not the guy. That this is the guy, we've got all our eggs in this basket, and it's this type of thing. They say, well, there's so many passes he missed by just a little bit, just a few inches or just a foot. He was almost there. Had he made this pass, the game would have been different. He almost made so many big plays last year, and that's kind of where they're guessing the almost will turn to every time this season. Yeah,
and I mentioned in the pre-show that's always going to be the case. If you are a quarterback who struggles with consistency and accuracy, it's usually by, a foot or two or inches. It's not going to be by 10 feet. That's just not the way it works. If you're missing by 10 feet every throw, you're doing a podcast right now. That's right. And maybe that just speaks to their quarterback room. I don't know if they got anybody to push him, or is anybody that has any. Georgia had a quarterback who was completely had those same numbers. They would be a competition during the season or the next year.
They've got a sophomore and a freshman behind him, and it's his spot.
Yeah, they lost. The best win they had last season was against Notre Dame, and you know how Notre Dame is perennially overrated. They were ranked 14th or 15th when they beat Notre Dame by a touchdown. But that's their best win last year. 4 losses, finished in, and that's pretty much the best predictor of what they'll do this year. Unless Klubnik takes a step forward, we always say that you see your best. You find out in that second year starting if you are that level player, and if you are, we've seen from Carson Beck, we saw what he could do last year in his first year starting. So we correctly assume he's going to have a spectacular year this year. When you saw a quarterback who just wasn't quality enough, as in Klubnik last year,
struggled all year,
then you can't really assume his second year is going to be that much different, and they're going to need him to be that much different. They're going to need him. It's the ACC, but there's some good teams in the ACC. Maybe not championship level teams, but good teams. If you finished 6th last year, there's some teams that
right.
You're not worried about. You're worried about winning the ACC right now. You're not worried about Georgia. Beating Georgia would feel like a huge task at this point where Georgia is, and where I don't know if Clemson fans see that they've fallen, Smooch, and they see that you've started to see some of the issues with their coach Sweeney, Dabo, and how some of the luster's definitely gone. I don't know if they feel that way. They probably are starting to feel that way, but they don't. I don't know what they could do better. I don't know if they'll have a better option if they got rid of Sweeney, which I don't see that happening.
Yeah,
I just don't. I don't know what the ceiling they think is. I don't know if they're championship level.
Well, they've put their displeasure with Dabo, they've put that into their new offensive coordinator, Garrett Riley. That's who's going to fix it. It wasn't a Dabo problem. It was an OC problem.
Gotcha.
So that's where they are. So they brought in Garrett Riley last year, his first year there. This guy, he played quarterback at Texas Tech from 08 to 09. Most recently, he was the offensive coordinator at TCU, coaching Max Duggan, however you want to say it, and all that stuff they did. And we got very familiar with them. Didn't seem to be too complex of an offense from what I saw. But anyway, that's where we saw him last. So this is Garrett Riley's second year. He is supposedly, he supposedly has this horse whisperer sense for quarterbacks to wide receivers. And so that's what they're counting on for a wide receiver room that has underachieved at every turn.
Yeah, and we've mentioned this now, and we'll see how because it's not 100% hit rate on this, of course. When you have you return your quarterback, your offensive coordinator, and your head coach, you normally have you can have a pretty good offense, but it's obviously not going to hit every year, and it's going to be a lot determine how quality that offensive coordinator is and how quality your quarterback is. But we'll see. But it is a countdown to kickoff. We do thank you folks for tuning in to the Dawgs Show. And we're going to do this countdown to kickoff all the way up till kickoff, which is August 31st.
August 31st.
So, and it's gonna be it's a noon game, and so where you are, it's like 11 a.m. game, right? Is that something crazy?
We've got to talk about food selections. I was just thinking about that.
Yeah. So, but we are looking so forward to that. It feels like we're there. I mean, when you're 3 weeks away, you're basically there, and we're gonna kind of track this segment and the countdown to kickoff. And we do thank you, fans, for tuning in. I want to encourage you. We talked about our numbers in the pre-show, how well we've been doing, and especially on YouTube. You folks have listened. We've asked you to check that out. And
absolutely, you've done great.
The show, folks are watching it and enjoying that product on YouTube. Doing quite well. We do appreciate you. You can find us anywhere, of course, on at the Dawgs Show Pod. Twitter has been fun as well. As it always is. Twitter is always a source of entertainment. I always pull Twitter up first and see what the fanatics are saying.
Yes.
It's always entertaining. So I had something else pulled up to talk about.
Yeah.
And we talked about Clemson needing to have a running game that was a difference maker, and not just one running back. Rarely can you just have one running back and get through a full season, and that's even if he's a stud. You know, I mean, you can have a Nick. If you've got a Nick Chubb, you're going to run him as much as possible. But even when Georgia had Nick Chubb, I mean, they had Sony Michel, and even one year they had Gurley in the same backfield,
and then they had Swift, right? Yeah,
man. So. Yeah, that's the kind of running back room you need to compete for championships, because teams will find a way to take away something you do well. If you can run the ball.
So true. That's so true.
You can win. You can win football if you can run the ball. It makes it so much easier to pass the ball. Looking at Georgia's running back room, it felt just like maybe even a year ago, last couple of years, it didn't feel like 2 years ago Georgia had a pretty good running back room, but still not elite, not that, like we said, Chubb and Michelle type running back room. But this year they have the potential. These guys here are so diverse and so talented. When you look at two game breaker type running backs who can take it to the house at any point, you're looking at Etienne, and then the true freshman coming in, Nate Frazier. And when we said that we're hearing things from practice, He is a name that's popping out, and they're like, oh, I knew he was, heralded, but this is a different kind of dude. This is that kind of guy that's got something that you notice when you see it, jumps out at you, that ability to get the speed and the quickness and a whole package. Nate Frazier has it.
Yes. So Troup Brinson and Dog Show fans, there's a difference. Like we hear, oh, this guy looks great. He's every bit of 5 stars. He can run. He can jump. You hear all that stuff from practice all the time. Rarely, and I mean rarely, do you hear what we're hearing about Frazier right now. And it's his feet. The footwork, the quickness of his feet, the change direction ability combined with really good speed has a lot of people. It's not this type of thing like, fingers crossed, this is a good player. No, this is giddy excitement over what Frazier's showing as a freshman, maybe 3rd or 4th on the depth chart right now.
And we saw at the spring game, Roderick Robinson looked like a changed running back too, because last year, his first season, he didn't have that lateral quickness.
The gear. He didn't have the gear, yeah.
Yep. And I think he's in better shape. And it felt like more of a bruiser. But this, in spring, we saw him put all that together. And so we were excited about seeing a combination of him and either Etienne or Frazier. But then the words we're hearing now is Branson Robinson has no restrictions at all.
No limitation.
They're not going to just throw him in there. He's got Coach Smart said they had to work on, being a complete running back, getting back to that, which is terms of blocking and everything else that goes along with things that aren't just running. But in terms of running, he is ready to roll. So think about that.
You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. I have heard, this is completely unsubstantiated. This is one of the few things I've heard third hand, but I have heard that Branson ran a 4.4 at the 6-month mark after surgery, laser timed on the Georgia field.
Wow.
Now
he's 220 pounds too. He's not small.
He is rocked up. Yeah. He is a rocked up guy. He's a thick guy, and he brings it hard. When I remember going to 247, and On3 when we were recruiting Branson, and it was he doesn't have the gear. And I don't know where that came from. He had a verified 4.4 in high school. 4.4 in high school is lightning. He had a verified 4.4 in high school. I don't know where it came from, but it led to him only being a 4-star and the Dogs getting a hold of him. So we're good with it. But, yeah, who's it going to be? ETN is we saw him at the spring game. He just was put on this earth to play football and catch the ball and run the ball. And I turned to Troup. What was it? Maybe 5 plays in? And I was like, wow. Yep. And then, but like right behind him, and you've still got Troup. We haven't even mentioned the fastest guy of that group in Dwight Phillips or Chauncey Bowens.
That's right. They're going to be red-shirted. It looks because you have to, and hope you can keep them. But you got 4 backs. Any one of these backs, and this is not hyperbole, any one of these backs could be the lead horse for Georgia.
Yes,
but they're so different. You look at like ETN. I think he's going to be such a weapon out of the backfield in terms of catching the passes and turn them into something big. But he's a tough runner too, from what we've been hearing. But you got those 2 guys, 190 to 205 pounds, Frazier and ETN, and then you have the guys 220, 230, and the Robinson duo.
Yeah.
Just ability to do whatever it takes to win. And Georgia's that's one of the hallmarks of what Georgia's been able to do the past few years. Is they can win in a lot of different ways. If you want to make them, if it's raining and the cold and the passing game is kind of shut down because of things of environment, Georgia is happy to win 16-6 like they did against Kentucky. Right. They're not forced to try to beat you in one dimension. And having these running backs like this gives them a whole lot of different things for teams to prepare for and to look at. And not to mention, you got the Heisman front runner at quarterback, and you got maybe the best offensive line in all of football, if not the best. It doesn't matter because that's just splitting hairs. Who's the best to dominate and to do what you need to do to score a lot of points. So they are loaded for bear, and that's the thing that I was really looking at, hoping to see in terms of their running back position. And I'm very pleasantly surprised.
That
room right now.
Yeah, sometimes Troup. Remember Andrew Paul? We were so high on Andrew Paul. Great running back out of Texas. Some amazing film. And Andrew Paul transferred. That's not always a bad thing. It's about you don't want your players to transfer, but think of what he's saying when he transfers. He's not transferring because he's going to be the first running back. He's not transferring because he's going to be the second guy. He's not sure he can win the third position. I mean, that's why he's transferring. That's the strength of that room because Andrew Paul can start at 50% of the colleges in the country.
Other names we've been hearing from the practice fields is freshman wide receiver Sakovi White.
Yes,
and we're hearing he has that. There's something about he's got that not like McConkey, but a similar kind of a skill set where he can get open and he's very very quick and elusive and can get open to make catches. And he's a tough football player. He's a football player is what they've been saying. He's not just not a track guy. He's not just a guy with just one dimension in terms of speed. He is a total football player, and he's somebody who's been turning heads. And we kind of called that. I think we saw that his last season in high school. Some of the highlight reel made us think, okay, we got somebody a little under the radar.
It was the jump he made. You watch kid go through high school, sophomore, junior, senior year, and usually there's a steady progression. Sakovi White made an insane progression. Because he's, like you just said, he's a complete football player. He blocks. He runs like a running back. He's got incredible quickness and his change of direction. That's what's really drawing rave reviews right now. And so because of that, he's getting open. But he is every year there's somebody you didn't see coming. It was at one point Ladd McConkey. Who's this freshman coming in and doing this or whatever? And redshirt freshman. But, yes, Sakovi, lots of guys excited about him, and he's shining amongst some really good – that's a deep room this year, and he's already making his name known.
Yep, Damon Wilson, another name we're hearing, has put on some good weight, and it looks like a beast out there. And there's so many names. Defensively, there's so much talent. We're not going to be able to predict anything other than those killers will end up getting most of the snaps. They'll find a way to be on the field.
Right.
If you separate yourself in practice, there's just so many names. Georgia has had historic classes the past couple years in the defensive backfield as well as at that linebacker position. So they recruit linebackers, and you can either add weight and move up, maybe outside linebacker, get to the line of scrimmage, or you could be one of those kind of Janelle Aguero type of big safeties.
Yeah.
Georgia, that's the skill spot at defense. Georgia has loaded up because and you get them to come in and stay. Some of the talent they've had, because they're second. There are, and this again, not hyperbole. They got folks who are third string right now, who I'm like, we got to get this guy some snaps because we don't want him to leave because it's that much talent. But when you recruit at the level Georgia does, and your standard is where it is, you're okay with that, and the cream will rise to the top. And hopefully you can rotate these guys in there to keep them healthy, because we know injuries happen.
Yes.
We want these guys ready, and it's going to matter once you get to the end of the season and this playoffs start.
Well, and Kirby's secondary has changed throughout the year. Starters has changed every year. I mean, it's a process. The veterans tend to get their way on the field earlier, and then the upstart guys with talent, they tend to work their way into the lineup later. I was going to say, Troup, as we were talking about Georgia's secondary depth, which you can argue who's got the best secondary in the country. You cannot argue who has the deepest secondary in the country. That's not an argument you can have. It's Georgia, and then there's a mile to second place.
Again, we also heard from the quarterback position, and obviously we know that Carson Beck is the undisputed starter, but again, people are surprised right now by what they've seen with Jaden Rashada. We know that he was highly heralded coming out of high school, and but he is picking it up really quick and has something special. He's a guy that I really thought that, okay, he'll come in and he's a name, and it's good to take him, a player who was once committed to Florida. That felt good to rub it in their face. It didn't even matter if he ever got on the field. I didn't know if he would, but I assumed that, okay, next year it'll be a competition between Gunnar Stockton and Ryan Puglisi. He's showed out as well. His arm talent is undeniable.
Arms really
but now there's from the words I've heard, Rashada looks like he may even have an edge. If you had to say right now, he might be the player who next year who has the edge in terms of winning that starting quarterback position. We don't know that, but just to be in the conversation for that, and not just saying, okay, this is Gunnar Stockton's team next year, because those are two totally different kind of offenses, and Georgia will have to make some decisions on that. But I'm glad that, because it looked like probably just a few months ago, I was like, man, next year after Beck leaves, it could be a totally different offense where we have to really defend, and because we're not going to have a team that scores 40-plus points a game. And we still may not. But I feel totally different now just from what I've been hearing in terms of the talent and the steps that they've taken forward.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Rashada is how quickly he's getting the playbook, and that's the thing. Everything Georgia does is complex, and so you can have all the talent in the world and just not climb up that ladder. The fact that he's come in and done that he's turned heads, and people are now not only talking about is it going to be him or Puglisi at the number 3 spot? They're talking about next year, if he progresses like this, does he have a shot to start? And so that type of thing, that can only make the Dogs better. You're not going to listen. All 3 of those guys, well, you got Gunnar, Rashada, Puglisi. You're not keeping all 3 of them. Okay. I mean, Georgia fans, it's okay. At least one of them's going somewhere else at some point. But that's the thing we talk about all the time on here. You put these killers, and those are all killers, and you put them in a room, and the one that comes out is your quarterback.
Right. Georgia we know how Georgia makes all this look much easier is they stack up around the line of scrimmage. Yeah. They just got another commitment from a huge offensive lineman, Juan Gaston. And he's one of those guys, 6'6", 6'7", and just a gigantic man and can move. And so they just continue to layer those guys on the line of scrimmage. And when we're talking about line of scrimmage, there's still Georgia got a top 5 class. It just depends on how they finish out. A couple of 5-stars who we are looking at who are the focal point for the defensive line, who are potential difference makers when you talk about 5-stars. When you got a 5-star defensive lineman or edge rusher, those guys are, they don't grow on trees.
They're more valuable than wide receivers.
Yes,
Mark that down.
They're probably the second the second most important thing to your quarterback, to be honest with you, in terms of making a team.
Quarterback, left tackle, and defensive end. Yeah, edge rusher.
Justice Terry and Elijah Griffin are still out there, and they are Georgia boys. And Georgia has every reason to feel very confident that as the season goes along, or whenever these guys make decisions and commit, that Georgia feels really good about those two. But the ink's not on the paper just yet. But we feel very confident that those will be 2 5-star players that Georgia adds to their squad.
Yeah, there's a way we have to speak from time to time, and I just think Georgia fans should be very encouraged right now. They should be very confident. When you talk about Elijah Griffin, you're talking about a guy that he's a 5-star. He's been a 5-star. He feels like a sure thing. And Troup, I remember back when we saw Brock Bowers, right? This is during COVID, so it's a little different. But, the Dawgs get a commitment from 4-star tight end Brock Bowers out of California. And we were like, okay, good, great. That's awesome. We didn't think generational, dominant. We didn't see that coming. And it's probably because of COVID that the film wasn't there for poor Brock. Right? But Elijah Griffin, the film's there, brother. It's there. He is as close, Troup Brinson, to a sure thing as on the defensive side, especially. Let me say that. He is as close to a sure thing on the defensive side as I have seen in a long, long time. The twitch, the size, everything, and the work ethic, it all seems to be there, Troup.
And most of the fans kind of wring their hands when you're talking about the wide receiver position, and they neglect to be really worried about the line of scrimmage, the defensive line. But those are the players that if you get those top end top talents, those are the guys you win championships with. And a lot of times we've seen Georgia be able to have developed wide receivers or have good wide receivers, but maybe not that top end talent, but still score tons of points. Mm-hmm. But at that line of scrimmage, it feels good to have those two guys who could commit at any point. We think that Elijah Griffin is closer to making his choice.
Yes.
Then Justice Terry may carry it out a little bit as their seasons are getting close to start.
And we feel really, really good about both of them. Listen to me. We feel really good about both of them. Turn your panic button off. Yes.
Yeah. And that will, if you follow recruiting and you say, well, Georgia's like a ranked number 3 or 4 right now, add 2 5-stars in there. If you care about that, if that's a competition you care about, it doesn't really matter because Georgia has addressed their needs and they all are right there. But you got to be in that top 5 a lot of times. And that has proven itself out. Those teams perennially are in the conversation for a championship.
Right.
And Georgia's got all the players that everybody wants. And I did see that. I think Griffin's recruited by, I don't know. I think Georgia's easily the team to beat there. I think he's got maybe a South Florida team, South Carolina. But Justice Terry he's being recruited heavily by Alabama. That would be the main thing with Justice Terry. Unless somebody threw some money out there he couldn't turn away or turn down, like a Florida State or something, or Miami, I think that Alabama is the main competition for Justice Terry. But I really want we got Gibson in the fold, the defensive end. He looks like a game changer. I really want Griffin. And then he's 1A. And then 1B is Justice Terry for me. So we can't wait for that. And as they're coming to visit, when Georgia is having an epic season, and they want to be a part of that already because they've been visited Georgia's more than anybody else.
Right.
But there's not a ton more out there. I mean, those are the guys. You'll see some players pop up here and there, but those in terms of name players –
right,
are the last 2 on the board that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, aside from some flips, that's going to be about the end of the drama. And of course, there will be a few flips.
There you go. CJ Wiley, he's the wide receiver Georgia really wants, that committed to Florida State, but is keeping his options open, and he said that he hasn't signed anything. So he's another name to watch that Georgia feels comfortable or confident that we
are huge CJ Wiley fans. Yes.
He's that wide receiver Georgia covets right now. But man, it's been a fun show to get back on the air after a week plus, and we're going to continue to do a countdown to kickoff where we talk about a little about Clemson and of course a lot about Georgia. The only other thing I saw was, it was kind of funny. It made me laugh. I sent you a clip of it where as a USC fan, man, they are right on top of that delusion mountain.
Oh, that's right.
In Colorado too, but it was USC who said, well, when games start and these recruits, especially Justice Terry, get to see our defense, we got a shot to kind of get them back interested in our program, as if the USC defense that they put on the field is gonna be better than what Georgia shows you. If that's gonna be what sways him.
The last thing a USC Trojan fan should want is for a defensive recruit to watch the Trojans play defense.
Unless you're saying, hey, I got opportunity to play right away there.
Right. I could probably play as a sophomore in high school. Yes.
Ooh, yes. But we follow that. And I will say that on Twitter, I think it's going to be a fun season either way with Colorado.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people want to put a shovel of dirt on that program. There's been some stuff come out recently, whether it's true or not, about their culture and their locker room. I don't want to get into that, but it's going to be interesting to see if all that talk with Colorado, I mean, you are hugely skeptical that it's going to work. It's one of those things that,
but we want it to.
It shouldn't work, but it shouldn't work based on what we know about culture and team chemistry and all that. It should fall flat on its face. If it does work, if they win 8 games this year,
I need your undivided attention real quick.
I'm really gonna pay attention to say, how are they making this happen?
What's Coach Prime doing? Yeah.
Is it just the schedule? Is that easy to navigate? But it's going to be interesting to follow because on Twitter, folks, they are a big presence right now. A lot of those fans are a big presence, and
a 10-win floor, Troup. A 10-win floor.
10-2 is our floor for sure.
Floor. So yeah, we're gonna we say that because we care.
We do care.
And we want to help you folks, as we have with Tennessee, navigate those steps and nurture that process, because it hurts when you think that when everybody else kind of looks at you and smirks and you don't get the joke. Yeah,
that is Tennessee. Yes. Yes, but luckily Tennessee this year has the best player that has ever played college football.
Yeah,
and he's never really started a regular season game, but he's the best one ever.
I've been working on his name. Is it Yamaleva? Did I say it correctly?
Yeah,
Yamaleva.
Maleva. Yeah,
I nailed it. So I wanted to get that. It took me a while to say DJ Ungalele. That's the way I say his name too.
Yeah, but he was too big to get injured. I got a feeling you're going to need to know the name Nico for 3 weeks. But
yeah, just call him Nico. I don't have to say Yamaleva, but I like saying it because it flows so well.
It does flow. It's beautifully phonetically sounding.
Great to be back, folks, and thank you for tuning in to another spectacular edition of the Dawgs Show. And we'll get this out for you real soon.
Yes, sir.
We'll talk to you right around the corner. 3 weeks to go.
Oh, so close, Troup Brinson.
This is the Dawgs Show with Troup and Smooch.